Hello, my friend. Welcome. This is a place where history meets rest, where we wander through the long-forgotten paths of ancient humanity in a calm and soothing way. Before we begin, know that these videos are designed to help you drift into sleep while your subconscious mind travels back into the forbidden rituals of ancient tribes and the secrets their shamans never spoke aloud. So dim the lights, settle in, and let us begin. Imagine the Ice Age night, a darkness so complete that stars seem like holes poked into the sky. Around a small circle of fire sit people wrapped in hides of reindeer and bison, their faces lined with cold and hunger. Children sleep near the embers. Hunters rest with spears across their laps, and dogs twitch restlessly at their master's feet. Yet not all are asleep. At the very center sits a figure different from the rest, the shaman. His body is wrapped in furs, painted with red ochre mixed with animal fat. Around his neck hang claws of cave bears, teeth of wolves, small bones of birds. They rattle softly whenever he moves, a sound like whispers in the night. Upon his head rests a mask, sometimes made from the skull of a bear, sometimes carved wood painted with lines of black and red. The firelight flickers across it, making the eye sockets glow faintly. This image is not fantasy. Archaeology shows us that shamans of the Upper Paleolithic often wore animal parts in ritual. From the caves of Trois Frères in France, we have the famous sorcerer figure painted on stone, half man, half stag, antlers rising above a human form. At Dolní Věstonice in Moravia, archaeologists uncovered figurines of women, animals, and hybrids, many baked in clay and deliberately broken in ritual acts. These fragments hint at ceremonies unseen, words never spoken to outsiders. Shamans were keepers of the unseen. They healed with herbs and chants. They foretold hunts by reading cracks in bones. They carried the tribe's fears into visions. In some cases, they were feared as much as they were revered. Their rituals were forbidden not because they were evil, but because they were secret. Outsiders could not hear them. Even children of the tribe learned only pieces. The whole knowledge passed carefully from one shaman to the next. Imagine sitting by that fire. The shaman sprinkles powdered ochre into the flames. The smoke rises red, curling upward like blood turned to air. He shakes a rattle made from a hollow gourd filled with stones. The sound is sharp, insect-like, rattling in rhythm with his voice. His chant is low at first, almost like humming. Then it grows louder, stronger. The words are not common speech. They are fragments of an older tongue, broken phrases that mean nothing to you, yet everything to the tribe. This is not imagination. Across Europe and Siberia, archaeologists have found rattles carved from reindeer antler and bird bones. Some were filled with pebbles to create sound. Many were buried with their owners, suggesting these were not toys, but ritual tools. They were meant to echo the rhythm of heartbeats, of steps in trance dances, of hooves and wings. The shaman tilts his head. He listens to something no one else can hear. Is it the spirits of ancestors buried in ochre graves? Graves like those at Sungir in Russia, where 2 children were laid with thousands of ivory beads, fox teeth, and spears of mammoth bone. Or perhaps he hears the animals themselves, the mammoths and bison that fed the people, their spirits demanding respect. In anthropology, this is called animism. the belief that every stone, every stream, every beast carries a spirit. To offend one's spirit is to risk hunger or sickness. To honor them is to keep balance. And so the shaman continues. He wears the mask not to disguise, but to transform. When he dons the bear skull, he becomes the bear. When he paints his skin with red ochre, he becomes the blood of the earth. When he shakes the rattle, he becomes the thunder of hooves. The people do not see him as only a man. They see him as doorway. Imagine how it feels. The fire crackling, the mask glowing, the chants rolling in rhythm. You feel your eyelids heavy, not from boredom, but from trance. The smoke itself thickens the air, making vision blur, making sound stretch. For the tribe, this is not sleep. It is journey. And what does he see? Shamans in many hunter-gatherer societies describe visions of flying, of animals speaking, of walking into caves filled with ancestors. In the painted caves of Lascaux and Chauvet, there are chambers so deep that torchlight barely reaches. Yet on the walls are bison, lions, horses painted in flickering lines. Were these art pieces, or were they records of visions seen in trance? Many archaeologists argue they were ritual spaces, not places of living, but of transformation. The shaman alone would lead. He would guide the people into darkness, torches in hand, rattles echoing. The walls would flicker with animals that seemed to move. The air would be thick with smoke and breath. Here, in this sacred place, forbidden rituals unfolded. Not all were dangerous. Some rituals were about fertility. Clay figurines of women with wide hips, like the Venus of Willendorf, suggest prayers for birth and survival. Others were for the hunt. Spears were thrown at painted animals, practiced not for skill, but for magic. By striking the image, they struck the spirit, but always there was secrecy. The words used in chant were not written. They were not even the same words as everyday talk. They were sacred syllables, fragments repeated until meaning was not in sense but in sound. A rhythm that carried minds away from fire into shadow. Tonight, as you listen, you might imagine yourself there. The fire warm on your face, the smoke stinging your eyes, the skull mask turning slowly toward you. You feel seen, though the man beneath is hidden. The rattle shakes again, the chant rises, the flames leap higher, and you understand why these rituals were forbidden, not because they were evil, but because they were powerful. No one outside the circle was meant to hear them. The fire crackles low, but the shaman's mask still glows faintly in its light. The mask is more than decoration, more than costume. It is transformation. Across the ancient world, masks made from bone, antler, or wood allowed a person to slip from being merely human into something else. To wear the antlers of a stag was to take on the stag's swiftness, its power, its spirit. To wear the skull of a bear was to embody its ferocity, its guardianship of caves and winter dens. The mask was a doorway. Archaeologists have traced this practice through fragments left in soil. In the caves of Trois Frères in southern France, a faint charcoal drawing shows what is often called the sorcerer, a figure half man, half animal, with antlers rising above a human face, arms spread as if in dance. Some believe this was not an artist's fancy, but a memory of ritual. A shaman painted as he appeared to his people, caught between human and beast. At Star Car in England, antler frontlets have been found, red deer skulls carved and drilled so they could be worn upon the head. The holes align perfectly with straps, suggesting these were not discarded hunting trophies, but ritual gear. Imagine a figure stepping into firelight with stag antlers towering above him, shadows stretching against hide walls. The tribe would see not only the man, but the animal spirit alive in him. Ochre played its role too. That red dust, ground from iron-rich stone, appears across prehistoric sites from Africa to Siberia. Graves as old as 100,000 years show bodies sprinkled in ochre. It was not practical. It was symbolic. Red was the color of blood, of life, of earth itself. When shamans smeared ochre across their faces, they were painting with the essence of survival. At Sungir in Russia, ochre stained the bones of 2 children buried with thousands of beads and carved ivory spears. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, ochre pieces were engraved with abstract lines 70,000 years ago. Was it art, or was it a code understood only by those inside the circle? Either way, the ochre carried meaning that was not meant for outsiders. Masks and ochre together transformed the body. The human face disappeared, replaced with symbols of animal and spirit. The body became red, black, white, painted in stripes and swirls. Each pattern meant something: lines to summon, dots to protect, spirals to confuse. Many hunter-gatherer societies, even into modern times, paint their bodies for ritual in ways that echo these ancient beginnings. Horns and antlers were not only worn, they were sounded. A hollow horn could become a call, deep and echoing across the valley. Archaeologists have uncovered instruments made from bone and horn, flutes carved with careful holes more than 30,000 years ago. When played in the echoing chambers of caves, the sound must have felt otherworldly. Imagine a shaman blowing through a horn while wearing a mask, his body painted in red, his shadow dancing across bison painted on walls. The effect was not illusion, it was transformation. The cave itself became part of the costume. In Lascaux and Chauvet, the chambers twist and narrow, torchlight making the walls flicker. Animals painted in layers seem to move as shadows pass. Archaeologists note how many of the painted animals are in places far from natural light, places difficult to reach. These were not decorations for daily life. They were sanctuaries of ritual. A painted bison was not simply a bison. It was the bison's spirit, summoned to join the gathering. At Dolny Viestonitz in Moravia, fragments of clay figurines show animal shapes: lions, bears, birds, many deliberately broken after firing. Was this destruction part of ritual? To create and then to end? Some researchers believe so. Creation and breaking were both sacred acts. Even the simplest objects could be masks. A bird skull tied over the face, a jawbone held in hand, a cloak of feathers stitched from wings. Hunters already wore animal skins for warmth, but when arranged in certain ways, they became something more. A wolf pelt with its head resting on a man's brow turned him into wolf. To the tribe, the line between man and beast blurred. For the shaman, this blurring was the point. He was no longer himself when masked. He was doorway to spirits, to ancestors, to forces unseen. When he shook the rattle, when he stamped his feet in dance, when he blew the horn, the mask completed the change. To challenge him then was not to challenge a man, but to challenge the spirits themselves. This explains why many rituals were forbidden, not because they were cruel, but because they were dangerous. Words spoken in ritual were not safe outside. Masks worn in ritual were not meant to be seen without fire. The power was too sharp, too close. To reveal it was to risk unbalancing the tribe, and so secrecy grew. The people would glimpse masks only in firelight. They would hear chants only in darkness. Children might watch from the edges, eyes wide, but they would not understand. Apprentices might learn fragments, but not the whole. The full truth was whispered only from one shaman to the next. Modern anthropology finds echoes of this in many traditions, from Siberian shamans donning cloaks of bird feathers, to Native American medicine men wearing antlers in dance, to African ritualists painting with red earth. The costumes change, but the meaning endures. To wear another form is to cross into another world. And when you imagine it now, you can almost feel the weight, the antlers heavy on your brow, pressing down across your skull, the ochre gritty on your skin, mixing with sweat, the rattle shaking in your hand, its rhythm quickening with your heart. You see shadows flicker, animals leap on cave walls, the mask pulling you away from yourself. This is why shamans never spoke aloud of what they saw. The vision was not for all. It was forbidden because it was fragile. Like fire, it could warm, or it could burn. The people did not need to know the details. They needed only the outcome. The hunt would be blessed. The sick might be healed. The spirits calmed. The mask had done its work. And so the fire burned low. The ochre glowed faintly on skin. The mask stared into the dark. The tribe turned to sleep, and the shaman alone carried the weight of words never spoken. The mask hides the face, but sound reveals the spirit. When the shaman shakes the rattle or hums a chant low into the fire, it is not noise for entertainment. It is vibration. It is rhythm. It is the heartbeat of ritual. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments of flutes carved from vulture bone and mammoth ivory, some more than 35,000 years old. The oldest examples come from the Swabian Jura in Germany, where caves like Hohlefels and Vogelherd have given us fragile instruments with carefully drilled holes. When played, these flutes can still produce notes across a scale. That means Paleolithic people were not only making sound, they were making music. Imagine it. Inside the narrow chamber of a cave, a single note echoing against stone. The torchlight flickers across paintings of horses and lions. The shadows stretch and move. The sound is not flat. It bends. It deepens. It multiplies as echoes answer back. To the people gathered in darkness, it must have felt like spirits themselves were singing. Chants work in the same way. Repetition dulls ordinary thought. Words loop again and again until their meaning fades and only rhythm remains. The shaman's voice would rise and fall, sometimes low as a growl, sometimes high as a cry. The people listening might sway unconsciously, their bodies following the pulse. Breathing matches the chant, heart slow or quicken. This is trance. Anthropologists studying modern hunter-gatherers note how drumming, rattling, or chanting for long periods can induce altered states of awareness. It is not fantasy. It is physiology. The brain shifts when rhythm repeats. In deep caves with no daylight, the effect intensifies. Even the simple sound of stamping feet matters. In Chauvet Cave, scientists measured how sound carries. Certain chambers amplify low notes dramatically. A footstep can sound like thunder. A hum can echo like a roar. Some of the painted walls are in exactly these spots. Coincidence? Perhaps not. The walls were not only canvas, they were instruments. Consider the rattle. Simple to make, powerful in effect. A hollowed gourd filled with pebbles, or a carved bone tube with seeds. When shaken slowly, it mimics falling rain. When shaken fast, it becomes insect wings. Fire crackle, swarming chaos. In many cultures, the rattle is used to connect with spirits of weather, animals, ancestors. The sound is not melody, it is memory. Drums, too, may have existed earlier than we once thought. While organic material decays, impressions in soil and parallels from later hunter-gatherer societies suggest that stretched hides over hollow wood or bone were common. A drum beat in a cave chamber is more than rhythm. It is heartbeat multiplied. It is the pulse of earth itself. Now picture the full ritual. The shaman masked and painted, a rattle in one hand, a drum echoing nearby. Around him, hunters hum low, voices layered like the growl of many beasts. The fire pops and hisses, sparks leaping upward. A flute pierces through, high and trembling. The sound fills chamber after chamber, bouncing back until it feels like invisible voices join in. The painted bison leap in torchlight. Lions prowl in flicker of flame. The people sway, their eyes heavy, their breathing deep. They are not only hearing, they are journeying. Many researchers believe that cave rituals were not merely performance, but vehicles for trance. In altered states, shamans report visions of tunnels, spirals, grids of light. Cave art often includes such abstract shapes. They may not be decoration, they may be maps of what was seen behind closed eyes. The combination of sound and silence mattered too. After long minutes of drumming or chanting, sudden silence is overwhelming. The crackle of a single spark becomes thunder. The drip of water in a cave feels like speech. In that silence, the shaman's voice, low and deliberate, carried immense weight. Even outside caves, sound-shaped ritual. In open tundra or forest, horns made from bone could call across distance. A howl through antler sounded like wolf. A hum into hollow wood sounded like bear. To imitate the beast was to invite it or to control it. You might think this superstition, but sound itself is power. It startles animals. It unites hunters. It marks territory. To shape sound deliberately is to shape the world. This is why some rituals were forbidden to speak aloud in ordinary life. Words sung in chant were not repeated at the hearth. Notes played on flutes in darkness were not played by children at play. The sacred sound had place and time. To break the rule was to strip it of power. Archaeologists sometimes call this restricted knowledge. It is knowledge known by few, used by fewer, guarded carefully. In tribal societies, secrecy is survival. To share everything with everyone is to risk chaos. The shaman carried secrets not because he wished to hoard, but because secrecy itself gave the ritual weight. You can imagine sitting among them, the air hot with breath and smoke, the drum echoing in chest, the rattle crackling in ears. Your eyes blur with torchlight, your thoughts scatter. For a moment you are neither fully awake nor fully asleep. The mask across the fire tilts toward you, and the sound grows heavier, deeper. You feel as though the cave itself is speaking. When morning comes, the tribe will rise as usual. Hunters will sharpen spears, women will scrape hides, children will play with sticks. The sounds of ritual will fade into silence, but the memory remains. The echo of chants, the hum of flute, the stamp of feet. They are not forgotten. They linger like smoke long after fire burns down. This is the hidden power of sound, not to entertain, not to delight, but to carry humans out of themselves, to pull them into shadow and firelight, where ancestors wait, where animals speak, where forbidden words are whispered and never repeated. And so the mask glows faintly still. The rattle shakes. The cave breathes with sound, and what is heard here will not be spoken again. The fire grows dim, but the memory of chants lingers in the chest, and when the sound fades, another ritual waits. Burial. From the earliest traces of humanity, how we treat the dead has always carried meaning. A body is never only a body. It is vessel. It is memory. It is doorway to the unseen. Archaeologists know this because graves tell stories. In Sungir, northeast of Moscow, 2 children were buried side by side more than 30,000 years ago. Their small bodies were laid carefully with thousands of ivory beads sewn into garments. Each bead required hours of carving, drilling, polishing. To create so many meant months of labor, even years. And yet, these were not offerings to the living. They were placed with the dead. Nearby, an older man was also buried, stretched flat, his body painted heavily with red ochre. Long ivory spears lay across him, some taller than his own frame. Around him too were beads, pendants, carvings. His burial was not practical. It was ceremonial. This is the mark of ritual. In other sites across Europe, ochre stains the soil where bones once lay. At Dolny Vistonice, burials of women were sprinkled with red powder, sometimes alongside fox teeth or carved figurines. At La Pharisee in France, Neanderthals laid their dead in shallow graves, marked with stone slabs. Some children were buried with tools they could never use. Was it preparation? Was it offering? The details are lost, but the pattern is clear. The use of ochre especially is striking. It was not needed. It does not preserve bodies. It does not feed the living. Yet across continents and tens of thousands of years, red ochre appears again and again. The symbolism is almost certain. Red as blood, as life, as rebirth. By painting the dead, the tribe may have believed they were painting them back into the cycle of life. Shamans guided these burials. Their role was not only healer and seer, but keeper of the boundary between living and dead. They knew the words to speak, the gestures to make, the materials to lay. A grave was not dug without their hand. The process itself was ritual. The body was washed or smeared with fat, the face painted with ochre, the hair bound with cord. Objects were chosen carefully: beads, shells, tools, sometimes carved figurines. The grave was lined with stone or wood, the earth packed firm. Then the shaman would sprinkle ochre across chest and face. whispering words too quiet for others to repeat. Sometimes fire was involved. In some regions, bones show signs of burning, not from accident, but from intention. Cremation may have been practiced even in deep prehistory. Fire purified, it transformed flesh to ash, just as the shaman's chants transformed the dead from presence to memory. And always, there were markers, antlers planted in earth, stones arranged in circles, skulls of animals placed above. These were not random. They were warnings, or guardians, or signs for spirits to find their way. Imagine the scene. The tribe gathered in silence. Torches flicker as men lower the wrapped body into soil. Women wail softly, rocking back and forth. Children clutch beads in their fists, not fully understanding. The shaman steps forward. His mask hides his face. His rattle shakes once. Ochre falls like dust of blood across the corpse. Words are spoken, not to the people, but to the earth. And then the grave is filled, stone by stone, soil by soil, until only a mound remains. The mound itself becomes sacred. People avoid stepping on it. They place food nearby, or beads, or bones of hunted animals. They speak names in whispers. The grave is both warning and promise, a reminder that the dead are never gone entirely. Ancestor worship begins here. The dead were not forgotten. They were invoked, their names repeated in chant, their spirits asked to bless hunts, to guard children, to curse rivals. The shaman was voice of the ancestors. In trance, he might claim to walk among them, to hear their words. And the tribe believed, because belief carried them through hunger and cold. Some graves reveal this power directly. At Dolny Vistonis, a woman's body was buried twisted, deformed in life by disease. Yet her grave was rich with offerings. Perhaps she had been shaman, her difference made sacred, her burial more than death. It was continuation. Even Neanderthals practiced burial with care. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, skeletons were found dusted with pollen. Some scientists suggest flowers were placed on graves, whether symbolic or accidental. The image endures, a body laid with blooms, petals falling across stone. It is ritual in its simplest form. The forbidden part was not the act itself, but the knowledge behind it. Why this ochre and not another pigment? Why this bone beside the hand? Why this orientation of body? Such choices were not random. They carried codes only shamans knew. To reveal them openly would break their force. The people accepted this. They did not ask. To question was to weaken the ritual. To believe was to strengthen it. And so they trusted the shaman's silent gestures, the sprinkling of powder, the muttered words into soil. The burial ground itself became more than cemetery. It was sacred space. At times, rituals were held there beyond burial. Offerings of food or beads placed long after. Fires lit on anniversaries of death. Songs sung facing the mounds. The dead were not separate. They were part of the living tribe. And in caves, bones tell deeper stories. At El Cedrón in Spain, Neanderthal remains show careful placement. At Goff's Cave in Britain, human bones were carved and engraved. Some argue ritual cannibalism. Others argue ancestor veneration. Either way, The body was more than flesh. It was symbol. All of this reveals a truth. To ancient tribes, death was not the end. It was transformation. A person became spirit, ancestor, guardian. But only if buried correctly, only if the shaman spoke the words and painted the ochre. To deny a burial was to deny memory. That was punishment worse than death. So when the fire burns low and silence hangs over camp, the people do not sleep easily. They know graves wait at the edge of light. They know spirits listen. They know the shaman alone walks between worlds, and they do not ask what he whispers into earth, because some words are not meant to be repeated. The graves rest silent at the edge of firelight, yet life continues within the camp, and where there is death honored, there is also birth celebrated. Fertility was not only private, it was sacred. The survival of a tribe depended less on weapons than on wombs. Without children, there was no future. Without mothers, there was no memory. This reality shaped rituals as much as the hunt or the burial. Archaeologists have found countless figurines across Ice Age Europe, small carvings of women with exaggerated hips, wide thighs, heavy breasts. Some are barely a few inches tall, others fit neatly into a hand. They are often faceless, but their bodies are unmistakable. The most famous is the Venus of Willendorf from Austria, carved more than 25,000 years ago. Her head is covered with rows of carved patterns, perhaps hair, perhaps a headdress. Her body is rounded, fertile, abundant. She was not portrait, she was symbol. Similar figures appear at sites from France to Siberia. The Venus of Hohlefels in Germany is even older, nearly 40,000 years. The Venus of Dolny Vistonets was fired in clay, one of the earliest known ceramic objects. Many figurines are broken, sometimes deliberately. Was this part of ritual? Creation followed by destruction? A cycle of fertility itself? The role of these figures remains debated. Were they charms for pregnancy? Were they symbols of mother goddesses? Or were they teaching tools, reminders of life's cycle? Perhaps all. What matters is that they were made in large numbers and often left behind in places of gathering. Their presence suggests ritual importance. Fertility rituals may have included dances, women painted with ochre, swaying around fire, men joining in with stamping feet, horns sounding low. The movement itself imitated cycles of life, swelling, contraction, release. Shamans may have led with chants invoking ancestors and animals known for abundance. Some rituals were linked to animals themselves. Mammoths were symbols of plenty. Reindeer returned in herds each year, a cycle as reliable as the seasons. To carve their forms alongside female figurines may have tied human fertility to animal fertility. The well-being of one meant the survival of the other. Even caves hold clues. In Chauvet, the walls show not only lions and horses, but abstract symbols. Dots, triangles, crosshatches. Some researchers suggest triangles represent the female form. These marks repeat in patterns, as though coded prayers. To us, they are simple shapes. To them, they were power inscribed into stone, and the forbidden part. Rituals of fertility often involved acts never spoken outside the circle. Sacred words whispered only in trance. Secret markings carved where only firelight reached. Shamans guarded the knowledge of timing, of seasons, of cycles. They knew when animals migrated, when plants bloomed, when wombs were most likely to quicken. To reveal this openly would strip it of mystery. Mystery was the shaman's tool. Women themselves held quiet power here. They were more than mothers. They were keepers of fire, makers of beads, preservers of food. In many burials, women are found with rich offerings. Some scholars believe women served as shamans too. A body at dolni vestonic, twisted by disease, buried with artifacts, suggests she held spiritual authority. Her difference marked her as special. Birth itself was surrounded with ritual. Imagine a hut warmed with firestones. Women gathered close, chanting softly as another crouched in labor, ochre smeared across thighs, beads tied to wrists, the shaman outside muttering to spirits, rattling softly to ward off death, the cries of birth mingling with chants of survival. Infants were sometimes buried with beads before they ever lived long. Their tiny graves remind us that birth was dangerous, survival uncertain. To mark these children with offerings was not wasteful, it was plea. Perhaps they would return in another body. Perhaps their spirit would guard the living. Across the Ice Age world, fertility was sacred because it was fragile. The people understood hunger. They understood cold, but nothing struck deeper than the loss of new life. Rituals tried to protect against it. Songs, carvings, dances, all became shields against the unknown. And when you picture these figurines, smooth stone shaped by hands thousands of years gone, you are seeing more than art. You are seeing prayer made solid, a plea pressed into stone, a secret never spoken aloud, but carried in palm after palm. Even today, the Venus figurines feel heavy with meaning. They are small. Yet when you hold one in imagination, you sense the weight of generations, not portraits of individuals, but symbols of continuity. The tribe endured because women endured, and the rituals honored this. The shaman's mask may have carried horns, but beside him always stood women with beads, with ochre, with fire. Their rituals balanced his voice carried to spirits of sky and beast, theirs rooted in earth and womb. Together they shaped survival. This is why the figurines were never discarded casually. They were placed carefully, in caves, in graves, in hearths. Their presence lingered. Their silence spoke. And so fertility itself became forbidden ritual, not because it was shameful, but because it was sacred. The words used, the gestures made, were never spoken outside. Only those who carried them lived the memory. The fire burns on. The figurines rest in soil. The chants echo in caves. And what was whispered then remains unspoken still. The figurines rest in soil, but painted walls and carved bones remind us that animals too carried sacred weight. For Ice Age tribes, animals were not merely food. They were teachers, protectors, rivals, and spirits. Every hunt was negotiation. Every death demanded balance. In Chauvet Cave, more than 30,000 years ago, lions prowl across stone. Their forms overlap, heads low, tails raised. They are not hunted in the paintings. They are observed, respected, perhaps feared. In Lascaux, aurochs surge in great herds, horns sweeping wide across walls. Horses gallop in rows, their manes streaming. The caves are alive with beasts. But these are not decorations. They are ritual spaces. Archaeologists note that many painted chambers are deep inside caves, far from light. Torches were needed just to reach them. Why paint so far from sight? Because these walls were not meant for daily eyes. They were sanctuaries. The shaman would lead the people into darkness, torches flickering, shadows twisting. The walls already held images painted long before. Horses layered upon horses, mammoths layered upon mammoths. The repetition was not error, it was invocation. To paint an animal was to call its spirit. To layer another upon it was to strengthen the call. Some animals were carved into bone and antler. At Vogelherd Cave in Germany, tiny ivory figurines show lions, mammoths, horses. At Dolny Vistonis, clay animals were fired and often broken. At Hola Fells, a figurine of a lion-headed human was found, a hybrid form, man and beast together. This lion man figurine, more than 30,000 years old, is one of the oldest known sculptures in the world. Its meaning is debated. Was it God? Was it shaman? Was it memory of vision in trance? The hybrid is not accident. It reflects belief that humans could cross into animal and animals into human. The shaman embodied this in ritual. He would wear a wolf pelt, its head resting on his own. He would dance hunched like bear, stamping feet. He would leap like stag, antlers bound to brow. The people watching did not see only man. They saw spirit walking before them. Totem spirits are what anthropologists call them now. The idea that each clan or group was linked to a particular animal. One tribe might claim the mammoth, another the eagle, another the bear. To harm the totem animal was forbidden. To honor it was necessary. Even when hunted, its bones were placed with care, its skull kept separate, its spirit addressed with chants. In Siberia, evidence of bear cults stretches back thousands of years. Skulls of bears arranged carefully in caves, sometimes on stone slabs. In Europe, too, bear bones appear in contexts suggesting ritual rather than mere butchery. The bear, powerful and human-like in form, able to walk on two legs, hibernate like death and return like rebirth, was central to belief. Wolves carried their own power, fierce hunters, yet also pack-bound. Their howls echoed through valleys. To imitate wolf in ritual was to borrow its strength, its unity. A wolf pelt across shoulders transformed the shaman into leader of unseen pack. Birds, too, were honored. Feathers found in burials, talons worn as pendants. At sites across Europe, eagle claws were strung as ornaments, not jewelry for beauty, but charms of flight, of vision. To wear talon was to see as eagle, to fly beyond human limits. And then the mammoth. The mammoth was life. Its meat fed dozens. Its hide clothed and covered huts. Its bones formed frames. Its tusks carved into tools and art. To kill a mammoth was more than hunt. It was negotiation with Earth itself. Shamans guided this with ritual. Before hunt, spears were painted with ochre, charms tied to wrists. Dances imitated the mammoth's gait, slow and heavy. Horns sounded deep notes, echoing trumpeting calls. The people prepared not only physically, but spiritually. They sought permission. After hunt, bones were arranged. Sometimes skulls were placed upright, tusks forming arcs like gates. At Mezherik in Ukraine, huts were built entirely from mammoth bones, arranged with care. Was this practical? Of course, but it was also symbolic. To live within bones of mammoth was to live within its spirit. Even predators became ritual allies. Cave lions painted not as prey, but as presences. Hyenas carved into bone. The people did not dominate animals. They coexisted in a world of respect and fear. And so rituals blurred line between hunter and hunted. When the shaman danced in mask, the people believed he became stag or bear or wolf. When chants echoed, the cave itself seemed filled with hoofbeats or roars. When offerings were left by skulls or bones, it was not death but dialogue. This is why many rituals were forbidden to speak aloud. If a shaman whispered words to mammoth spirit before hunt, those words lost power if repeated at hearth. If he donned bear mask in trance, to describe it openly after was dangerous. The spirit might be angered. Anthropologists see echoes across the world. Inuit hunters singing to seal, thanking it for life. Plains tribes dancing as bison before hunt. Siberian shamans climbing poles as if tree between earth and sky. The patterns stretch far because the roots are deep. Imagine it now, the fire burning low, the shaman crouched, covered in pelts, horns rising from brow. He stamps feet in rhythm with drum. The people chant, low and steady. The rattle shakes like rain. Torchlight flickers on painted walls. Horses seem to gallop. Lions prowl. The air grows thick with smoke and sound. You feel your body sway, though you do not move. You are no longer in cave. You are in world between. This is where human and animal merge. It is not metaphor. It is survival belief. To understand wolf is to survive winter. To honor mammoth is to secure meat. To imitate eagle is to see prey before it sees you. Ritual was not separate from life. It was life. The forbidden part remains. Words unspoken. Dances unseen outside firelight. The tribe knew only fragments. The shaman carried whole, and even he did not speak it freely. The spirits do not forgive carelessness, so the walls hold their secrets. The figurines keep their silence. The bones rest in soil, and across the fire, the mask stares into darkness. The animals still prowl across stone, their forms flickering in torchlight. But ritual does not end with paint or dance. It leads inward, beyond the mask, beyond the chant, lies the journey. Shamans were not only performers of ritual, they were travelers. Their role was to step across boundary between visible and invisible, to carry questions of tribe into realms where answers lived. Anthropologists studying shamanic traditions across Siberia, the Americas, and Africa note recurring patterns. The shaman lies still or dances until exhaustion. Breath slows or quickens beyond ordinary rhythm. Drums pound steady. Rattles shake endlessly. Eventually eyes roll. Words tumble into chant. And then journey begins. In trance, shamans describe tunnels, spirals of light, grids that shimmer and bend. These are not fantasies. Neurologists studying altered states note that the brain itself produces such visions under sensory stress. Patterns called entoptic phenomena appear behind closed eyes. Spirals, zigzags, dots. Now recall Chauvet and Lascaux. Among lions and horses are strange symbols. Dots clustered in rows, zigzags etched across walls, ladder-like grids. To us, they look abstract. To shamans, they may have been maps of what they saw in trance. Not decorations, but records of journeys. The cave itself was portal, to enter narrow passage, to squeeze through stone, to emerge in chamber black as night. This mirrored the journey into spirit world. Torchlight flickered like visions. The sound of breath echoed like voices. The deeper one went, the closer to other side. In some caves, footprints remain. At Chauvet, small prints of child, alongside wolf prints. Was this coincidence or ritual? Did the child walk beside wolf in vision or in flesh? Archaeologists cannot say, but the image lingers, human and animal together in shadowed chamber. The journey often followed a vertical path. Shamans across cultures speak of axis mundi, the world axis, a great tree or pole linking underworld, earth, sky. By climbing in vision or by descending into caves, the shaman traveled between realms. When caves were painted with animals, they may have been more than representations. They were stations along the path. To pass lion was to enter courage. To pass mammoth was to enter strength. Each chamber deepened trance. At times, substances helped. Archaeological residue from pipes, gourds, or stones suggests some plants were burned or consumed, while direct evidence from Paleolithic Europe is scarce. Parallels from later hunter-gatherers suggest that smoke, roots, and herbs played roles. Even without them, exhaustion, hunger, cold, and repetition could alter consciousness. The forbidden aspect lies here. Ordinary people could not walk into vision. To attempt without training risked madness. To hear voices without guide meant danger. Only shaman carried songs to anchor journey. Only shaman knew which chants opened doors, which closed them. These words were never repeated outside ritual. To reveal them risked chaos. Imagine lying on reindeer hide, firelight dim. The shaman's drum pounds slow, steady. Your eyes close. Darkness deepens. A spiral of dots appears. You feel pulled through tunnel. Wind rushes through, you are still. The rattle shakes, guiding you forward. You see beasts move, ancestors speak. You hear voices like thunder. You wake hours later. The shaman sits still, eyes half closed. He does not tell what he saw. Only that hunt is blessed. This secrecy was survival. If all knew details, vision would lose force. If all claimed to journey, tribe would splinter. By keeping words hidden, shaman ensured balance. The people did not need to know path. They needed only to trust outcome. Archaeological hints reinforce this. In caves like El Castillo in Spain, red handprints cover walls. Some hands are small, some large, some with fingers missing. Scholars debate. Were they clan marks? Were they symbols of vows? Or were they signs left by those who journeyed? A hand pressed in ochre, left deep in cave, is both mark and memory. The lion man of whole fells too may reflect vision, a figure neither fully human nor animal. Hybrid beings appear in trance experiences worldwide. The mind blends forms, creating guardians, guides. To carve such image into ivory was to honor what was seen. Even burials whisper of journeys. At Sungir, beads and ivory spears covered bodies. Were these provisions for travel? To guide spirits along path into unseen. The red ochre too may have marked transformation. Blood of life guiding into death's tunnel. The cosmology of ancient tribes cannot be mapped fully, but traces suggest 3 realms. Earth where people lived, underworld of ancestors, sky of spirits. The shaman's drumbeat was ladder, the cave's passage was tunnel. The chant was rope pulling soul across. This is why rituals were forbidden, not because they hid cruelty, but because they guarded knowledge too powerful for all. To misuse was to risk tribe survival. To repeat without care was to tear open doors meant to stay closed. And so caves remain silent. Paintings flicker still, animals layered on animals. Symbols whisper across walls, footprints linger in dust. They are not explanations. They are echoes. The shaman walked there once, masked, painted, chanting low. He stamped foot, shook rattle. He fell into vision. He returned with words he did not repeat. The fire outside burned on. The people slept. The shaman alone carried memory, forbidden, fragile, yet essential. The journey through caves does not end with visions alone. It leaves marks, not always of animals, not always of people, but of symbols. Across the walls of Europe, Africa, and beyond, abstract signs appear. In Chauvet, alongside lions and rhinos, clusters of dots repeat. In El Castillo, a red disc dated to more than 40,000 years ago sits beside hand stencils. At La Pasiega in Spain, ladder-like patterns run across stone. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, 70,000 years ago, pieces of ochre were engraved with crosshatch lines. They are not pictures of hunts. They are not portraits. They are signs. What did they mean? That remains forbidden knowledge. Some archaeologists suggest they were tallies, marks of days or animals. Others argue they were clan symbols, identifiers like banners before writing. Still others believe they were sacred codes, maps of visions, prayers pressed into stone. The truth may be all at once. The repetition is striking. Triangles appear often, sometimes pointing downward. To us, they are simple shapes. To the people, they may have symbolized the female form, fertility, birth, continuity. Zigzags echo across caves. In trance visions, zigzags are common in toptic forms. To carve them in stone may have been a way of capturing what the mind saw. Spirals too appear, coiling endlessly inward, a tunnel into other world. The language of bone was no less mysterious. Beads drilled from shells and ivory, strung into necklaces. At Sungir, more than 3,000 beads covered burials. Each bead required hours of labor. Such effort was not decoration, it was communication. The arrangement, the placement, the color all carried meaning. To outsiders, it was jewelry. To insiders, it was code. At Blombos Cave, tiny shells were strung as necklaces nearly 75,000 years ago. To wear such beads was to carry identity. They spoke without words, perhaps of clan, perhaps of role, perhaps of ritual. Even tools carried marks: a spear thrower from France carved with horse, a baton of antler etched with dots, practical in use, yet symbolic in detail. Shamans may have read such markings like text, each dot a season, each line a path. This is why language was not always spoken. It was inscribed quietly, left in caves, carved into bone. The people outside might see, but not understand. Only the shaman knew. Consider the handprints. In caves across the world, hands pressed in ochre reach across walls, some large, some small, some missing fingers. Were they injuries or signs of vow? A missing finger bent inward may have been symbolic, perhaps a gesture of oath, perhaps a way of marking individual within group. Modern researchers found that many of these stencils were made by women. Breath blown over hand pressed to wall, the act itself ritual. To leave print in darkness was to leave presence beyond life. The wall became memory, and yet such symbols were not explained openly. They were forbidden speech. The shaman did not gather tribe and say, "This triangle means womb," or "This zigzag means lightning." He left them unsaid, because power rested not in sharing, but in mystery. The forbidden language was everywhere, on ivory pendants carved with lines, on stones etched with crosshatches, on figurines broken deliberately, on bones drilled with dots, on walls painted deep in caves. Each carried double life, practical to outsider, powerful to insider. Archaeologists today catalog them as abstract signs. But imagine standing before them by torchlight. The shaman points to ladder painted high on wall. He shakes rattle once. He says nothing. You understand nothing, and yet you feel weight, because silence is part of code. Forbidden knowledge is not always hidden. Sometimes it is placed in plain sight, but meaning locked by silence. Even burial beads tell this, strung carefully across chest of child, not for play, not for beauty, but for symbol, for tribe to see engrave and to know silently. And so the ancient world was full of signs, some scratched in ochre, some whispered in chant, some carried on beads across throats of shamans. They were language without alphabet, words without sound, and today they remain forbidden, not because tribes chose to keep them secret from us, but because the code is broken. We can see dots, triangles, ladders, but we cannot hear the chant behind them. We can hold beads, but we cannot know the vow they carried. We can trace the handprint, but we cannot feel the breath that left it. The shaman knew, the people believed, and now we guess. But perhaps that is part of power, because even as you listen now, you feel curiosity stir. You want to know what the signs meant, yet you cannot. That frustration is itself the echo of forbidden. The caves are silent still. The beads rest in soil. The engravings fade with time. And across fire, the mask stares. The rattle shakes once. The silence holds meaning no words can carry. The signs linger on walls, silent, coded, their meanings locked away. Yet symbols did not only guide hunts or births, they shaped feuds. Because tribes did not live in endless harmony. The Ice Age was not only cold wind and painted caves, it was rivalry. Territory mattered. Rivers rich with fish, valleys thick with herds, caves with shelter. To lose one was to starve. And where survival is tight, grudges bloom. Archaeological evidence whispers of conflict. At Jebel Sahaba in Sudan, more than 13,000 years ago, dozens of skeletons were buried with flint points still embedded in bones, arrowheads lodged in spines, cuts across skulls. This was no accident of hunting. This was violence between people. In Europe, too, skeletons show fractures, blunt force marks, healed and unhealed. At Talheim in Germany, a Neolithic mass grave holds men, women, children, many struck down with blows to head. Their killers were not strangers of another species. They were neighbors. But how did shamans fit into this? Knowledge itself was weapon. To declare hunt blessed or cursed. To whisper that rivals had angered mammoth spirit. To claim ancestors demanded revenge. The shaman's voice shaped how tribe understood feud. His silence could inflame tension. His rattle could seal alliance. His forbidden chants were more dangerous than spears. Imagine two camps across river, both eyeing herds grazing between. One shaman paints body with ochre, dons antlers, declares river spirit theirs. The other burns bones, rattles charms, declares same valley guarded by ancestors. The dispute is not about deer alone, it is about unseen authority. The forbidden rituals gave weight to claims. At times, conflict may have been ritualized, groups meeting not to destroy, but to test strength. Evidence of broken weapons left in pits, of bones arranged oddly, suggests some violence was more theater than massacre, a clash to satisfy spirits, then withdrawal. But at other times, feuds turned final. Camps burned, graves filled hastily, children buried with beads as if to carry them safe into other side. Shamans carried power here. Their masks terrified rivals. Their chants cursed enemies. In Siberian traditions, much later, shamans spat curses across rivers, sending sickness to foes. In Ice Age Europe, we cannot prove exact words, but bones tell us effect. Even trophies were ritual, skulls kept not for food but for warning. At Gough's Cave in Britain, human skulls were carved into cups. Was this cannibalism or ceremony? To drink from rival's head is to claim spirit, forbidden, yes, but powerful. In feuds, animals too played role, to steal rival's skull of bear, to desecrate their mammoth bones. This was not simple theft. It was assault on their spirit guardians. Forbidden rituals were turned against each other, and secrecy made it sharper. Because the rival tribe did not know chants spoken. They feared what was unsaid, to hear drum in night across valley, to see torchlight flicker in cave far away, to smell smoke carried by wind. All of it became omen, perhaps curse, perhaps blessing withheld. Fear grew in silence. Archaeological traces echo this fear. At Çatalhöyük, thousands of years later, walls were painted with vultures hovering above headless corpses. Death was reminder, warning. At earlier sites, bones show cut marks not of butchery but of display. Rival dead made message. In these feuds, shamans were double-edged. They were healers of wounds, but also causers of them. They could calm grief or stir rage. Their forbidden words guided hands to lift spears. The people accepted it. They needed to. Without belief, chaos spread. With belief, feud had purpose. Spirits demanded revenge. Ancestors expected defense. The shaman never explained rituals of feud to all. He spoke fragments to apprentices. He carried full weight himself. To reveal chants openly would weaken them. To share curse words beyond circle would make them ordinary. And ordinary words do not strike fear. So when tribe heard rattle shake low at night, they knew curse had been cast. When ochre was painted on spears, they knew hunt was blessed against rivals. When antlers were planted upright in ground, they knew territory marked. The forbidden rituals of feud were not shouted. They were whispered into earth, and so bones pile, spears break, camps burn, but across it all, silence, because power is not in noise. It is in what is left unsaid. The graves tell truth. At Jebel Sahaba, half the skeletons bear marks of repeated attacks. Not single massacre, but ongoing feud. For generations, arrows flew, clubs struck, and still tribes endured. Shamans guided them through it. At Talheim, bodies were thrown into pit, but even there, some wore beads. Ritual clung even in violence. This is the paradox. Ritual sanctified feud. Violence became not random, but demanded, and shamans carried responsibility. Their forbidden knowledge turned survival into sacred struggle. You would not survive it. Not the silence heavy with fear, not the chants that curse you unseen, not the torchlight flickering in rival cave across valley. You would not last a night listening to drum echo through trees, but for them, this was life. The shaman still sits by fire. His mask gleams faintly. He shakes rattle once. Rivals listen across darkness. They hear not sound, but omen, and neither side dares speak aloud what it means. The feud fires fade low. The chants fall silent. Yet across time the traces remain, not only in bones, not only in beads, but in stories that echo thousands of years later. Archaeology gives us fragments. Myth gives us whispers. Together they reveal glimpses of what shamans carried as forbidden knowledge. Consider first the Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a figure carved from mammoth ivory more than 30,000 years ago, tall, human in body, but with lion's head. It took weeks to carve with stone tools. This was not idle craft. It was devotion, a symbol of transformation. Was this the memory of shaman masked with lion pelt? Was it vision from trance? Spirit guide seen in darkness? The hybrid is not accident. It is belief made solid. At Dolní Věstonice in Moravia, thousands of years ago, clay was fired deliberately in pits. Figurines of women, animals, hybrids, many cracked and broken by heat. Were they offerings to fire? Were they destroyed to release power? Among them, burials of unusual individuals. One woman deformed by disease buried with care, rich with artifacts, perhaps shamaness. Difference was sacred. The Sungir burials near Moscow whisper even louder. An old man buried with spears carved of mammoth ivory, his body painted with red ochre. Two children buried side by side, thousands of beads sewn into clothing, each bead hours of labor. They were not simply loved, they were revered. Were they chosen for ritual roles? Were they symbols of continuity? The presence of spears taller than themselves suggests meaning beyond practicality. Shamans guided such burials. Farther east, in Siberia's frozen ground, the remains of shamans survive in later burials, cloaks stitched with bird claws, headpieces of antler, drums buried beside them. When archaeologists uncover such graves, they reveal continuity, the tools of trance carried across millennia. Even in the Americas, echoes survive. At Windover in Florida, burials more than 8,000 years old show bodies wrapped in woven textiles, offerings placed with care. One individual buried with carved antler tools, perhaps too fragile for hunting, perhaps symbolic. And then there are the caves themselves: Chauvet, Lascaux, Altamira, vast sanctuaries of paint and echo, animals layered, symbols repeated, torches flickered once, voices echoed once. The forbidden rituals unfolded there, and yet, tens of thousands of years later, the images still hold presence, as if stone itself remembers. But archaeology is only half the voice. Myth carries the other. Across Siberia, shamans describe climbing trees or poles to reach sky spirits. Among the Sami of the Arctic, drums painted with symbols guided visions. Among Native Americans, sweat lodges, chants, animal dances carried knowledge. These are later cultures, separated by time and space, yet the patterns echo the Ice Age. The axis mundi appears everywhere: a tree linking earth and sky, a rope, a ladder. Shamans ascend, or descend, to speak with spirits. This matches the caves: narrow passages as tunnels, chambers as otherworld, torchlight as stars. The animal transformation survives too. Bear dances in Siberia, wolf dances among plains tribes, eagle feathers worn in ritual. Each echoes the masks and pelts found in European burials. To wear animal is to become animal, to cross boundary. And secrecy remains constant. In nearly every shamanic tradition, forbidden words exist. Songs sung only at night, chants whispered only in trance, symbols painted only by chosen hands. The echo of Paleolithic secrecy still hums. Archaeologists hesitate to draw straight lines. Too much time separates. Cultures are diverse, but the parallels are striking. When we look at ochre burials in Africa 70,000 years ago, and compare to Siberian shaman graves with ochre 5,000 years ago, the thread stretches, not identical, but resonant. When we see dots and zigzags painted in caves and compare to trance visions reported by shamans today, the pattern repeats. When we hold Venus figurine in hand and compare to fertility charms of historic tribes, the purpose feels familiar. The forbidden rituals of ancient tribes may not have vanished. They may have changed shape, hidden in myths, transformed in practice, surviving in echoes. And what does this tell us? That shamans carried not only power for their own tribe, but seed of traditions that would ripple across humanity. They guarded chants, masks, symbols. They whispered to fire, bones, and caves. They kept silence where others demanded words. This silence is their legacy, because even today, as archaeologists scrape soil, as we shine lights on painted walls, we see marks, but not meanings. We hear echoes, but not words. The forbidden remains forbidden. And yet, that is why it still pulls us. Imagine standing in Chauvet Cave now, the air cool, the walls alive with painted horses, the chamber silent. And yet you feel presence, not because you know what ritual was, but because you know you cannot know fully. Mystery itself endures. That is the forbidden gift of shamans, to create spaces where silence is louder than words, where paint is heavier than story, where beads are weightier than speech. And so the lion man still stares with ivory eyes. The beads of sun gear still glitter. The ochre of Blombos still stains. The antler masks of Star Car still rest in soil. The forbidden rituals remain, not spoken, not explained, but alive in fragments. The fire burns low. The mask glows faintly. The rattle shakes once, and the silence stretches. The cave is still here. The paintings still whisper. The beads still rest in soil. The shamans are long gone. Their chants silenced. Their masks turned to dust. And yet, we feel them still. We began with fire. The flicker of flame at center of camp. The shaman seated low, a mask of bone glowing in smoke. His hands shook rattle. His words hummed through night. You listened, and though you could not understand, you felt weight of silence. That silence carried power. Through the parts of this journey, we walked slowly, from masks carved of antler to ochre burials red as blood, from Venus figurines swelling with fertility to animal spirits painted on cave walls, from echoes of flutes in darkness to handprints left as vows, from feuds whispered in curses to ivory lions that blurred human and beast. Everywhere the same pattern appeared. Rituals hidden, words forbidden, not because they were shameful, not because they were cruel, but because power requires silence. Think again of sun gear. Children buried with beads sewn into clothing. 3,000 beads, each drilled carefully. The labor immense, the devotion complete. The people who placed them did not write reasons. They did not explain. But when you look upon them, you feel meaning heavy. That is the forbidden, the weight of unspoken. Think of Dolny Viestonice, clay figurines fired until they cracked, women with wide hips, animals with stretched limbs, broken deliberately, not discarded, but transformed. Why? The shaman knew. The tribe trusted. We are left with fragments. Forbidden once. Mysterious still. Think of Chauvet. Lions prowling. Rhinos clashing horns. Bison layered again and again. Deep inside cave, where no daylight enters. Paint applied by torchlight, flickering in breath of chant. These animals were not mere pictures. They were spirits alive in stone. Ritual animals, forbidden to ordinary eyes. And think of the lion man, carved from mammoth ivory, 30,000 years ago. A human body, a lion head, patiently shaped, polished, given form, a figure no one could mistake for reality. It was symbol, transformation, the forbidden power of becoming more than human. The forbidden rituals were about boundaries, between life and death, between male and female, between human and animal, between tribe and rival. between earth and sky, and the shaman walked those boundaries. He wore mask of bear, danced as wolf, stamped as stag. He smeared ochre across skin, painted bones, placed beads upon infants. He rattled to fire, hummed to ancestors, cursed rivals across valley. He carried chants no one else spoke. He held silence no one else broke. This was his burden. The people feared him, yet relied on him. They respected him, yet whispered of danger. His difference marked him, often physically, often socially, a limp, a disease, a strangeness of face or voice. In many burials, shamans are set apart, their graves rich with tools not practical, rattles, pendants, antlers. These were not for use in hunting. They were for use in unseen, and always. The rituals remained forbidden to speak in daylight. Why? Because mystery works only when preserved. Imagine if shaman returned from trance and explained, "I saw dots. They were zigzags. It meant lightning." The tribe would laugh. Or worse, doubt. And doubt weakens. But if he returns silent, eyes distant, mask still upon him, if he shakes rattle once and says only, "The hunt is blessed," then power stands. This is why so much of prehistory frustrates us. We see marks, but not manuals. We see beads, but not explanations. We see handprints, but not words. The forbidden is not absence, it is silence. And silence itself endures. Archaeologists today trace symbols across caves. They find that 29 distinct signs repeat across Europe for tens of thousands of years. Dots, zigzags, ladders, triangles. Were these alphabet? Not quite, but they were shared code, a secret language known across continents, passed through whispers, guarded in ritual, and still, no one explains them. Perhaps that is the point. Because humans crave forbidden, we lean toward what is withheld. We ache for secrets. That ache itself is ancient. It is why forbidden rituals carried such weight. Not all could know, not all could see, but all could feel. And what does that mean for us now? When you stand in museum before Venus figurine, you do not yawn. You stare. You feel something stir. Not because you understand, but because you do not. The mystery is alive. When you see red handprint on cave wall, you place your own hand against it. It fits, separated by 40,000 years, yet still human. Someone stood there once. They blew ochre over hand. They left mark. They said nothing. And still you hear silence heavy. When you hear of shamans rattling gourds, whispering chants, you imagine sound and darkness. You imagine fear of rivals hearing drums across valley. You imagine trust of tribe watching mask glow in firelight. And you understand. Without explanation, the forbidden rituals are not dead. They live in our fascination. They live in our myths. They live in our yearning for what cannot be said. This is why myths of later times carry echoes. Norse sagas of seers and fate, Siberian tales of bear spirit, Greek oracles whispering from caves. The pattern repeats, because root was planted in Ice Age fires. And here is what the shamans knew. Ritual is not about truth. Ritual is about weight. It is about silence heavier than words. It is about mask that hides, but also reveals. It is about chant no one explains, but everyone feels. It is about bone carved not for tool, but for meaning. It is about ochre sprinkled not for color, but for transformation. It is about forbidden that remains forbidden. And so as we close, picture the last fire. The people lie curled in hides, asleep. Dogs twitch by embers. Hunters dream of mammoths. Women dream of beads. Children breathe slow. The shaman alone sits upright. His mask leans beside him. His rattle rests across knees. He stares into smoke rising slow. He does not chant. He does not speak. But in silence, he still listens. He listens to spirits of earth, of ancestors, of beasts painted in caves. He carries weight of forbidden. He carries secrets never spoken. The fire crackles low. Sparks fade into dark. The mask stares with hollow eyes. The rattle silent now. The night grows still. And you, listening across thousands of years, feel eyelids heavy, breath slow. The forbidden rituals are not for you to know. They are for you to feel. So rest now. Let the fire burn low. Let the smoke curl upward. Let the silence deepen and drift into sleep, carried on echoes of chants never spoken. The fire is almost gone now. Embers glow faintly, a thin smoke curling upward into night. The camp lies silent. Hunters breathe slow under furs. Children twitch in dreams. Dogs whine softly in sleep, paws kicking at nothing. And yet one figure remains awake. The shaman. His mask rests beside him. His rattle lies across his knees. His body leans toward the fire, but his eyes are far away. He is keeper of silence, keeper of words never spoken aloud. And we, across thousands of years, across layers of soil and stone, are still listening. We have wandered far in this journey, from first flicker of firelight on masks, to the whisper of ochre sprinkled across burials, from figurines of women carved in stone, to painted lions stalking cave walls, from chants echoing in darkness, to feuds whispered into silence, from ivory lion men carved with patience, to beads sewn into garments of children. Each fragment told story. Each silence told more. And now, at the end, we gather them together. Masks were more than costumes. They were doorways. At Star Car in England, antler frontlets drilled with holes allowed straps to bind them to head. Red deer skulls worn in ritual, their antlers towering above human brow. Archaeologists debate their purpose. Were they hunting disguises? Perhaps. But more likely, they were ritual masks. Because when firelight flickers across antlers, shadow grows vast. The man is no longer man. He is stag. At Hohensteinstadel 30,000 years ago, Someone carved ivory into lion-headed figure. It was patient work, each groove deliberate. This was not toy, it was symbol, hybrid of human and beast. Proof that mask did not only cover face, it transformed identity. In ritual, to wear antlers was not play, it was embodiment. To dance as wolf was to call wolf's spirit. To crouch as bear was to become bear's guardian force. The forbidden words spoken beneath mask were never repeated, because power lies in silence. Death did not end presence, it shifted it. At Sungir in Russia, an old man was buried with mammoth ivory spears longer than his body. 2 children were buried with thousands of beads sewn into clothing. Hours upon hours of labor, for bodies that would never rise again. Why? Because these burials were not about practicality. They were about transformation. At Dolny Vestonits, women were buried with fox teeth, shells, pendants. At La Ferracie, Neanderthals buried their dead with slabs of stone placed above. At Shanidar in Iraq, pollen clung to bones, perhaps flowers placed on graves. Burials were rituals of continuity, ochre painted across bones like blood of earth, beads strung as guides, tools placed as offerings. The shaman whispered to soil, words not for living. The grave became sacred space, and the forbidden knowledge lay in choices unseen. Why beads here? Why ochre heavy on face? Why skull of animal placed beside? Outsiders did not ask. To ask was forbidden. Survival depended on new life. Fertility was fragile, sacred. Venus figurines appear across Europe. Willendorf, Dolny Viestonice, Hohlefels, carved from stone, ivory, clay, bodies exaggerated, hips wide, breasts heavy, faces absent or abstract. They were not portraits. They were symbols, perhaps charms for safe birth, perhaps prayers for plenty, perhaps images of goddess older than writing. Whatever their meaning, they were handled with reverence. Some deliberately broken, not destroyed, but transformed. Women carried power in ritual, not only as mothers, but as fire keepers, bead makers, knowledge holders. Some burials suggest women themselves served as shamans. Difference became sacred. Birth was ritual. Hides laid soft, ochre smeared on thighs, chants whispered low. The shaman outside muttering to spirits, rattling softly to ward away death. Infants who did not survive were buried with beads, as if to carry them into another life. These acts were not explained aloud. Their meaning was embodied. Forbidden knowledge passed through gesture. The Ice Age world was full of beasts. Mammoths, aurochs, cave lions, wolves, bears. They were not just prey. They were teachers, guardians, spirits. In Chauvet Cave, lions prowl across stone. In Lascaux, aurochs surge in painted herds. In Vogelherd Cave, Ivory carvings of mammoths and horses rest still. In whole fells, the lion man merges both worlds. To hunt mammoth was negotiation. Before spears were thrown, chants were spoken. Spears painted with ochre, dances imitated mammoth's gait. Afterward, bones arranged in arcs, tusks forming gateways. At Mezurich in Ukraine, huts built from mammoth bones stood like monuments. Life lived within spirit of beast. Bear skulls placed carefully in caves, eagle talons strung as pendants, wolf pelts worn across shoulders. To embody animal was to draw on its power. To harm totem animal carelessly was taboo. Shaman's blurred line, danced as wolf, stamped as stag, crouched as bear. The people saw not only man, they saw spirit. The forbidden chants spoken during these dances were never taught to children, because to misuse was to risk angering spirits. Silence preserved balance. Cave walls hold not only animals, they hold codes, dots, zigzags, ladders, spirals. At Chauvet, El Castillo, La Pasiega, at Blombos Cave in Africa, crosshatch etched into ochre 70,000 years ago. These were not idle doodles. They were language of ritual. Triangles, perhaps wombs. Zigzags, perhaps lightning or water. Spirals, perhaps tunnels into otherworld. Handprints stenciled in ochre stretch across walls, some with fingers missing. Was this injury or vow? To us, they are mystery. To them, they were power. Beads sewn into garments, shells drilled and strung, marks on bone tools. Each carried meaning beyond decoration. The arrangement of beads was message. The crosshatch on ochre was prayer. The forbidden part lay in code itself, visible to all, understood by few. Shaman held key. Tribe respected silence. Tribes clashed. Survival required territory. Valleys of deer, rivers of fish, caves of shelter. Where resources overlapped, grudges grew. At Jebel Sahaba in Sudan, skeletons bear arrowheads lodged in bone, not one battle, but repeated conflict. At Talheim in Germany, a pit held dozens struck down with blows to skull. Rivalry became massacre. Shamans were not bystanders. They shaped feud. Their chants cursed rivals. Their silence carried threat. Their masks frightened enemies. Their rattles echoed warnings. To burn bones of bear at boundary. To plant antlers upright in soil. To whisper curse into river. These were forbidden rituals of feud. Even trophies became sacred. At Gough's Cave in Britain, human skulls carved into cups. Was this hunger or ritual of dominance? Forbidden acts shaped memory. Conflict was not random violence. It was sanctified by ritual. Shamans turned survival into sacred struggle. Words never spoken aloud guided spears. Shamans traveled beyond fire. In trance, they described tunnels, spirals, grids of light, patterns mirrored in cave art. Neurology calls them entoptic phenomena, the brain itself producing shapes under stress. Shamans called them visions. The cave became underworld, narrow passages, tunnels into spirit realm, chambers, stations along journey, torchlight flickering like stars. Axis mundi appears across traditions, tree connecting sky and earth, rope climbed or cave descended. Shamans carried tribes' questions across boundary, forbidden words guided journey. Not all could follow. Without chants, visions overwhelmed. The shaman alone returned with answer. He explained only outcome, never the path. The forbidden rituals did not vanish. Later cultures echo them. In Siberia, shamans donned bird cloaks, climbed spirit poles. In Sami tradition, drums painted with symbols guided visions. In Native America, sweat lodges steamed bodies into trance. In Norse sagas, seers spoke from caves. In Greece, oracles whispered from darkness of Delphi. Different times, different forms, but roots familiar, masks, chants, symbols, silence. Forbidden words remain. Songs sung only at night. Gestures made only in firelight. Chants whispered only in trance. Archaeologists may not claim direct line, but echoes speak. So what do the forbidden rituals mean now? They tell us humans have always craved mystery, always feared death, sought life, honored beasts, always marked boundaries with silence. The shamans understood. Power requires secrecy. If all words are spoken, none carry weight. If all rituals are explained, none hold mystery. This is why Venus figurine still moves us. Not because we know, but because we do not. This is why handprint in cave still haunts us. Not because it tells story, but because it withholds. This is why beads glittering in soil still fascinate. Not because they are jewelry, but because they are a message we cannot read. The forbidden remains forbidden. That is its strength. And so, the last fire burns low. The camp lies silent. Children sleep. Hunters rest. Women dream. Dogs curl tighter. The shaman sits alone. His mask stares with hollow eyes. His rattle lies still. His silence stretches long. You sit with him. You listen. You feel weight of chants never spoken. You hear echoes of drums across valleys long gone. You see lions painted flicker in torchlight that burned out thousands of years ago. You do not need to understand. You only need to feel. The shaman looks into smoke. He does not speak. He does not move. And yet, you know, the forbidden rituals are not gone. They live in silence itself. And so you let your eyelids close. You let your breath slow. You let fire fade to embers. The last spark rises. The smoke curls. The silence deepens. Sleep now, carried on chants never spoken.